as we see a boy named Pei, who rushes to get to work. We learn he's just an average guy who got a normal job after graduating from college, but he finds his boss to be toxic. He makes it to the train station, and the doors are about to close, but he charges in and manages to get on just in time. We see that it's 1 minute to 9, but Pei dashes through, and he manages to sign in at the last moment. The morning goes by, and Pei starts thinking about what he should order for lunch, but he has to compare all the different discounts to get the best deal since he's broke. After he eats his lunch, he starts playing a game to relax, but when he notices his boss, he quickly tabs to a different screen. The boss watches from behind him, but doesn't notice anything. Pei continues with his game, but his boss constantly tries to catch him, trying to sneak up on him. At 6 p.m., Pei is the first to log off, preparing to get home as soon as possible, but he's stopped by his boss. His boss asks for a copy of his presentation, but Pei notes that the deadline is a week away. His boss insists on getting it today, but Pei refuses, telling his boss off. His boss threatens to fire him, but he doesn't care, telling his boss not to forget his severance or else he will sue. But we see this was just all his imagination, as he agrees to work overtime to get the presentation done. We see Pei working until he's the last one in the office, when the light goes out, and he suddenly gets a message. He sees that his friend sent him a quiz to see his fortune, but he accidentally drops his phone into his bin. As he goes to pick it up, he sees the screen that promises to reveal his fortune, and there's suddenly a voice that says the fortune conversion system will be activated. His phone bursts with light, and countless talismans suddenly appear, circling around him. He gets sucked up in the air and thrown into his bin, causing him to disappear. He gets woken up by his friend Yang, who tells him to get up for the dean's class because attendance will be taken. He's confused as he looks around, and his roommates tell him to get up as they leave. Pei realizes he's in his old college dorm, and he's gone back to when he was a freshman. He wonders what's going on, and he thinks about going to his class, but he remembers that the dean never actually took attendance in his class, while there was another teacher who always acted friendly, saying attendance didn't matter, but at the end of the semester, failed everyone that didn't attend. He thinks about how to get back to the future, but realizes that this is his chance to change his life, so he doesn't end up working a dead-end job. He's suddenly about to fall, but his fortune conversion system activates. The system comes to life and introduces itself as Richie. It explains that the system will give him a startup fund to help him get rich. He's given $50,000 to begin with, and he instantly thinks about the things he can buy. Richie goes on to explain that the system will give him money at regular intervals, which he can use to run a company, and based on his profit-to-loss conversion rate, he can earn money for himself. Pei gets excited about getting rich, and Richie generates his profit-to-loss conversion rate, but it doesn't go as expected, because his loss ratio is higher than his profit rate, so losing money is actually more profitable. He gets excited thinking it will be easier to lose money than earn it, so he celebrates how lucky he is. Richie tells him the next step is to register a company, so he wonders what kind of field he should get into, thinking of a shortcut, but Richie mentions a bunch of rules and restrictions, so he realizes he needs to have a legitimate company. He asks for some time to think, and he looks for some ideas. As he checks his phone, he realizes that the games industry would be perfect to lose his money, since it's hard to actually become successful. He tells Richie his decision, but accidentally names his company something ridiculous, but doesn't care since he doesn't plan to be successful. Richie goes on to warn him that he can't tell anyone about the system, or else he will face a punishment. Richie wishes him the best of luck, and a 14-day timer appears. Pei panics as he wonders how he can develop a game in only 14 days, and Yang returns to the dorm. Pei asks him if it's possible to make a game in only 2 weeks, and Yang says it's actually easy, revealing a platform filled with templates and resources that make it possible to make a game without even knowing how to code. We see Pei looking over the platform in the library, realizing it's not the best, but thinks it's perfect for just making a bad game. He spends $20,000 on a driving simulator template, paying $15,000 for background assets, and he adds some other basic features, managing to spend all his money. He thinks about what the gameplay should be like, and he decides to make the most boring game possible. He creates the course for the game, and he ends up making it over 8 hours long, thinking the players will hate it. He thinks it's perfect, calling the game The Lonely Desert Road, and he decides to sell it for only 1 yuan, so he can have the lowest profit in case anyone buys it. He sees that nobody is buying his game, so he becomes happy, thinking he's going to make a profit. Their neighbors enter the dorm, inviting them to play video games, but Pei tells them that he won't be playing, because he wasn't able to sleep the previous night. His roommates play against their neighbors, but they realize that they're all noobs, and they end up losing the match. As they continue playing, Pei rests on his bed, as Yang wonders if they're bothering him, but he reveals that he's enjoying the moment. We learn that after he started working, he bought all the games he wanted, but he wasn't able to play them because he was too busy with his tasks. But he knows that everything's going to be different because he just needs to lose money to earn profit, thinking he'll never need to work again, so he can live the life he always dreamed of. We meet the content creator Chow, and we learn that he's popular for covering bad games in his channel, but he's struggling to make money because he can't find a sponsor. He looks for a game to cover for his next video, and he finds The Lonely Desert Road. He reads the introduction, which mentions that the game will make him reflect on his life. He finds it interesting, so he decides to play it, and he's surprised to learn that it has no story whatsoever. He starts driving in the desert, but he becomes distracted, so he ends up crashing, causing him to lose the game. But he uses his controller, and he spends hours trying to complete it. But he starts to feel drowsy, so he tries to pause the game, but he realizes that he can't, and he ends up crashing again, causing him to become angry. He becomes determined to finish the game, thinking his gaming skills are being tested, so he decides to play it with everything he has. But he still struggles to clear it, and he's now frustrated, thinking about giving up, but a notification mentions that there's something waiting for him at the finish line. So he becomes curious, and he continues playing for hours, as he starts reflecting on his life, thinking he has achieved enlightenment. He finally reaches the finish line, but the game congratulates him for wasting 8 hours of his life, so he becomes angry, calling it a scam. We see Pei in his classroom, as Richie shows him his data, informing him that he has 11 days before the next closing date. He thinks he's about to make a fortune, because nobody's downloading his game, but at that moment, he hears his classmates talking about it, realizing it has gone viral. So he rushes back home, wondering why people are buying it, and he checks his laptop, realizing that it has become incredibly popular, because Chow covered it in his channel. Pei watches his video, as he tells his viewers not to play Lonely Desert Road, calling it the most boring game in history, and he mentions that it congratulated him for wasting his time. But this made people curious, so they started buying the game. Yang invites Pei to play it, saying they should give it a try, but he refuses, and he notes that the situation is bad, because he wants his game to flop. So he changes its description, trying to convince the players to ask for a refund, but they tell him that the procedure is tedious, so they decide to let him keep the money. A few days later, we learn that Yang has been playing the game, but he wonders how it became viral, saying it's terrible, but people can't stop playing it. Pei mentions that it wasn't meant to be played, and he falls into despair, knowing he's going to earn less. We cut to a man named Lee, who is the owner of a large gaming company. His assistant informs him about Lonely Desert Road, saying it's becoming popular, but she mentions that it only costs 1 yuan, saying it isn't worth buying, because they won't make a profit. But he reveals that he doesn't care about money, because his goal is to monopolize the gaming industry, and he fires her for not sharing his vision. Pei searches the internet, wanting to learn how to lose money, but he can't find an answer, because nobody's interested in that topic. The closing date arrives, and he realizes that his game earns 70,000 yuan, but because of the conversion rate, he only receives 700. Richie congratulates him for creating a successful game, but he isn't happy, because he wanted to earn more money. Richie tells him that he will have 300,000 yuan for the second round, revealing that he has 30 days until the next closing date. But he wonders how he's supposed to spend the money, because it can only be used to start a business. Pei returns home, and Yang invites him to play, realizing he's in a bad mood. He agrees to this, so Yang informs their roommates that he's going to join them, thinking they can finally get revenge on their neighbors. Pei carries the team, but they still end up losing, because Yang is a terrible player, so everyone blames him for the result. He tells Pei that he should have done a better job, so he becomes upset, calling Yang a burden, but he suddenly comes up with an idea. That evening, Pei thinks about Yang, thinking he's the key to losing all of his money. Pei approaches him as he sleeps, but he sees Pei, so he panics, alerting everyone in the building. The next day, Pei continues to follow Yang, so he becomes upset, asking Pei what he wants. He mentions that he wants Yang, so everyone gets the wrong idea, and he tries to run away, but Pei stops him, saying he needs help developing a game. But Yang is against this, thinking they won't succeed, and he's about to walk away. But Pei reveals that he has already made 300,000 yuan, because he's the creator of Lonely Desert Road. Yang is surprised to hear this, calling him a genius, and Yang agrees to work with him, saying he will find books about the topic. Back in the dorm, we see that Yang bought books about programming, and Pei thinks they're going to fail, because he isn't being practical. Pei reminds him that they don't need to write codes, because they already have the online platform to make the job easier, so Yang wonders what he should do with the books. He tries reading them anyways, but he immediately falls asleep, and Pei is happy to see this, thinking his plan is going to work. The next day, Pei thinks about the game they should make, knowing his company is popular because of a driving game. So he needs to think of something different, because people will download the game if it's similar to Lonely Desert Road. He considers spending all of his funds to create a bigger game and intentionally fail to launch it, but Richie warns him that he will receive a penalty, so he ultimately decides against it. He realizes that mobile players aren't familiar with his company, so he plans to create a mobile game. He knows that card games are popular, but most of them fail, because they try to copy the #1 game called The Three Kingdoms, instead of coming up with a new idea. So he decides to make the worst card game in the world, telling Yang that they're going to hire artists to help them with the design. Yang tells him that there's a cheaper way to do it, but he's determined to lose all of his money, so he tells Yang that he's going to invest everything he has to create the best card game possible. They eat at a restaurant, as Pei tells Yang to rewrite the stories of the characters, but he becomes worried, thinking it's going to ruin the game. But Pei tells him that they must not be afraid to innovate, saying he should let his imagination run wild. He thinks about turning the characters into strange creatures, and Pei calls him a genius. He decides to hire Yang, telling him that he will receive 3,000 yuan per month, and he's overjoyed to hear this. Meanwhile, Li's new assistant tells him that Three Kingdoms is losing players, because it's difficult to obtain rare cards. But he explains that the game won't be addictive if they change this, saying card games are on the decline, so they should just let it be. Li's assistant confirms this, and he mentions that Pei's company is planning to copy Three Kingdoms, saying there's no creativity whatsoever. But Li reveals that he was the one who picked the theme for their game, thinking his assistant is questioning his creativity, so he decides to fire him. We return to Pei, as he laughs at Yang's ideas, thinking their game is going to be ridiculous. He checks his laptop, wanting to hire a rookie artist to create ugly designs, and he finds someone interesting, thinking he's going to help them fail. The next day, Yang suggests turning the characters into girls, but Pei rejects the idea, thinking it could make their game successful. So he explains that he doesn't want the characters to lose their uniqueness, and Yang believes him, as he notes that Yang is an idiot. They ride a boat, as Pei tells Yang that they must prioritize the concept design, so he suggests hiring a great artist, but Pei is against this, because he doesn't want them to succeed. He believes that Pei doesn't want the artist to steal the spotlight, thinking Pei wants him to shine, so he mentions that they should prioritize gameplay over design. He offers to do the drawing, but Pei is against this, because he wants to waste money on a rookie artist. They have a heated argument, but the boat becomes unstable, causing it to capsize, as they realize that their guide is drowning. So they decide to save him, but he tells them to leave, blaming them for what happened. Pei tells Yang about the artist he found, and we see that he draws chibi characters. Pei convinces Yang that hiring him would be a good idea, saying it will create a unique style that will make their game stand out. Yang asks for his contact details, so Pei reveals that his name is Jin, and they decide to have a meeting with him. During the video call, Yang tells Jin about their plan, as Pei explains that they need him to design the 50 characters in the game, saying he can have full artistic freedom, but they don't want him to draw chibis. He wonders why they want to hire him, because he specializes in drawing chibis, so Pei tells him that they see potential in him. He agrees to do it, but he mentions that his price is 2,000 yuan for each character. Yang becomes upset, thinking it's too expensive, but Pei tells him that the price is too low, saying they're willing to pay him 3,500 yuan for his unique art style. He's surprised to hear this, thinking it's more than enough, but Richie warns Pei that unreasonably increasing the price is against the rules. So he tells Jin that it will include the amendment fees, and Jin agrees to this, as Richie withdraws the warning, thinking the price is reasonable. But we learn that he doesn't plan to ask for amendments. He tells Jin that he can do whatever he wants with the art style, because they believe in him, saying he has 2 weeks to complete the task. After the meeting, Yang comments that he doesn't like Jin, because he has a bad attitude, but Pei explains that he could be an introvert. Pei tells Yang to handle the art designs, while he works on the gameplay, saying they will be busy in the coming days. But we learn that he ordered Yang to monitor Jin, because he wants the drawing to be as ugly as possible, thinking they won't work well together. He thinks about making the players hate the game, by making it cost 10 yuan, which is 2 times the price of the 3 kingdoms, and he considers setting up a lifelong membership that gives them unlimited draws, thinking the players will get bored, because he knows that they enjoy grinding to obtain rare cards. He searches for the worst template he can find, and he sees a failed project from another company, which tried to copy the 3 kingdoms. He realizes that it looks horrible, thinking nobody would want to play it, so he decides to buy it. We cut to Jin, as he meets up with his team, telling them about the job, but they think the game is going to suck, because the character descriptions don't make sense. They consider abandoning the project, thinking the job is a scam, but Jin tells them that the client has already paid the deposit. He mentions that they have full artistic freedom, thinking this is their chance to make a name for themselves, so everyone decides to give it their best shot. He suggests sticking to the style he invented, thinking it's going to make the characters shine, but they explain that they aren't familiar with it. So he tells them that he will handle the designs, and they can add the finishing touches, saying they must come up with the best result possible. They start working on the project, giving it everything they have, and they're able to finish it before the deadline. We return to the dorm, as Yang realizes that Jin has already finished the designs, asking Pei if he wants to see it. But he doesn't care, telling Yang to put it into the game if he has no issues with it. He wonders what they should name the project, so Pei tells him that they should call it the Phantom General, and he goes to sleep. The next day, Yang tells Pei that he didn't find any bugs in the game, wondering if they should release it. Pei realizes that it's the launch date, so he tells Yang to upload it, saying they should market it as an ordinary card game. Yang thinks he's trying to use reverse psychology, but he doesn't really care, and he just wants to lose all of his money to make as much profit as possible. We see Yang getting beat up by his roommates, because they lost another game, and they blame him for the result, calling him useless. Pei suddenly arrives, pulling him away, and asks him why the concept design of the game is so detailed. Pei accuses him of stealing the design from others, but he explains that Jin created it, and Pei is surprised to hear this, because he thought that Jin is a terrible artist. Yang is happy with the design, but Pei becomes upset, saying it looks excellent, but Yang wonders why he's complaining, because Jin did a great job. He claims that it's because he's underpaying Jin, but we learn that it's because he wanted Jin to make ugly designs, so that his game would fail. Yang leaves him, wondering what's wrong with him, and he reveals that he regrets hiring Jin, thinking his game is going to become successful because of the brilliant design. But he thinks about the other games that flopped, realizing that they also have beautiful designs, so he thinks his game can still fail. Later that day, Yang tells Pei that 100 users have downloaded the Phantom General, but he realizes that they all left negative reviews. Pei is happy to hear this, thinking the game is going to fail, but Yang thinks that someone hired trolls to attack them. Pei pretends that it's bothering him, but he's grateful to the trolls, and Yang thinks about responding to their reviews. But Pei tells him to forget it, saying it isn't worth it, because there's too many of them, and Yang thinks he's a great person, because he's able to maintain his composure despite what's happening. After some time, we see Yang playing the lonely desert road, and he has a conversation with Jin, who wonders if they have issues with the design. He tells Jin that he did an amazing job, and they start talking about the game, as Jin's friends approach him, saying they're lucky to have such a kind-hearted client, because they were paid more than enough. He checks the game, and he sees that it isn't performing well, wondering why they haven't seen ads about it. He realizes that it was made by the same company which created Lonely Desert Road, and his friends are surprised to hear this, because everyone knows about the game. They wonder why the Phantom General didn't go through a testing period, thinking the company doesn't know what it's doing, and Jin decides to play the game. He notes that the gameplay is basic, and he's astonished by his own design, thinking it's making the game stand out. He realizes that special effects were added to his artwork, and he's happy to see this, because he thinks it looks perfect. He's able to obtain rare cards, and he continues to play the game, but he notices something strange. So he decides to call Yang, asking him why there's only one item for sale, and it's an extremely cheap lifelong membership. He wonders if they will be adding more items to the game's shop, but Yang reveals that they won't, because Pei wants the players to enjoy the game. Jin is surprised to hear this, thinking the company can't make profit, because the item only costs 30 yuan. But Yang explains that Pei doesn't prioritize making profits, and Jin thinks he's a great person, saying he doesn't want Pei to fail. Yang starts crying, telling him that Pei spent all of his money in the game, so he's already broke, thinking this is the reason why he's been acting strange lately. So Jin wants to help, and he ends the call, but we learn that Yang was just pretending to be sad. Jin meets up with his team, and they're surprised to learn that Pei doesn't prioritize making profits. They think he's amazing, because he's nothing like the other game developers who only think about money, so they decide to help him. We return to Pei, who thinks his game has already failed, so he starts thinking about the 300,000 yuan he's going to receive. But Yang suddenly clings to him, telling him that their game has gone viral. He's surprised to hear this, wondering how the players learned about the game, because he didn't spend money on marketing. He checks his phone, and he realizes that the game has been flooded with positive reviews, so he wonders why it's performing well. He realizes that the customers liked the concept design, so he decides to call Jin, asking him if he promoted the game on the internet. We learn that Jin shared it with other artists, who thought his designs are impressive, and he's surprised that the experts loved his artwork, but he wants to help advertise the game. His friends wonder why he wants to do this, knowing he hates socializing with people, so he tells them that he wants Pei to succeed, because he's an amazing person. So Jin tells everyone about the game, telling them that it was created by a kind-hearted person, so they decide to support it, leaving positive reviews, and causing it to go viral. Pei wonders why he did this, because he wasn't paid to advertise the game, but he explains that he really wants Pei to succeed. He becomes sad, realizing that he's going to earn less, but he thanks Jin for helping him anyway. Jin feels good, thinking Pei is really happy because his game is successful, but Yang thinks about the negative reviews, wondering who hired the internet trolls. We cut to Li, as his new assistant informs him that the Phantom General is about to surpass the Three Kingdoms. We learn that he was the one who hired the internet trolls, and Li thinks that Pei chose to copy the Three Kingdoms because he wants to prove that he's better than Li. He thinks he's being targeted, so he wants to acquire Pei's company, saying it's time to proceed with their plan. We see Pei in the restroom, making sure that no one is watching him, and he calls the customer service representative, telling her that he wants his game to be removed from the recommended list. She explains that this is a strange request, saying she needs to talk to her superiors, but Richie suddenly appears, telling him he's breaking the rules, so he ends the call. Pei becomes sad, and he starts walking around, but a screen appears on the ground, as he realizes that the closing date has arrived. Richie appears, and it starts tallying, revealing that Pei made a net income of over 500,000. So he falls into despair, wondering why the game is so profitable, because it was made to flop, and Richie tells him he's going to earn 5,000 yuan because of the conversion rate. Richie reveals that the next closing date will arrive in 90 days, and he thinks about how profitable his games have become, realizing that he's struggling to lose money. He hates Richie for increasing the starting fund, but Richie tells him that he already has enough for the next round, so they won't be increasing it. At that moment, he receives an additional 1,000 yuan, as Richie reminds him that his games are still earning money. We return to Li, as he tells his assistant that Pei's company has grabbed his attention, so he's willing to spend money to acquire it. Pei is watching a soccer game, when he suddenly receives a call from Yang, who tells him that Li wants to buy their company. So he becomes overjoyed, thinking about accepting it, but he receives a warning, because he isn't allowed to sell his company, so he's forced to reject the offer. But Yang tells him that Li is offering millions of yuan to buy their company, and he becomes devastated, but he still tells Yang to refuse it. Li offers to invest in their company, but Pei explains that he doesn't need it, because he has more than enough money at his disposal, asking Yang if he can invest in Lee's company instead. Lee learns about this, so he becomes upset, thinking Pei is trying to humiliate him, and he starts seeing Pei as his rival. We see Pei and Yang eating in a restaurant, as Yang wonders why Pei isn't in the mood, reminding him that his games are profitable. He refuses to talk about it, but we learn that it's because his games have earned 6 million yuan, wondering how he can spend all of it in 3 months. Yang says he's going to pay the bills, and he calls the waitress, as Pei realizes that Yang is richer than him. Yang is surprised to see the bill, thinking it's too expensive, so he asks Pei if he can get reimbursed for the meal, and Pei comes up with an idea. So he tells Yang to wait for him, and he leaves the restaurant. Pei calls Richie, wondering if he can file the meal as a company team building exercise, and Richie tells him that he can, because it doesn't go against the rules. So he becomes happy, wondering if he can also file a claim for his daily expenses, but Richie tells him it's prohibited. He returns to Yang, saying he's going to pay for the meal, and they watch the news, as the reporter announces that a new integrated system has been invented. Yang realizes that the technology is advancing, thinking they should make a more complex game in the future, but Pei thinks they can't do it because they lack the knowledge. But this gives him an idea, saying they should hire more people, and he becomes excited, thinking it will cost him a fortune to pay for them. He admits that he doesn't know how to run a company, so they think it's time to hire an assistant. Moments later, Pei suggests going to a headhunting agency to recruit someone, and Yang hopes that their company can become the leader in the industry. We see a large company called the Fiery Sky Studio, as its producer Joe checks the performance of the employees. He realizes that an employee named Lin is about to be laid off, but he calls his subordinate, saying she should be allowed to stay in the company. At that moment, Lin enters the room, telling him that she wants to resign, so he becomes sad, wondering why she's doing this. She explains that she wants to achieve her dreams, and the company isn't the right place for her, but she thanks him for looking after her. After she leaves, he calls his client, saying he just completed his task, and he assures his client that Lin will stop dreaming of making games. We see Pei and Yang in a headhunting agency, as they meet a man named Lawrence, saying they want to hire someone. But he thinks they aren't worth his time, telling them that his services are expensive. But Pei reveals that he's willing to pay his assistant 400,000 yuan a year, so Lawrence immediately decides to entertain them. He starts asking for the details, and Pei explains that he wants a female secretary who can help him with trivial matters, because he wants someone pretty to brighten up his mood. Lawrence shows him the resume of a girl named Lulu, saying she has an impressive background, but Yang wonders why she left her job. So Lawrence explains that she doesn't want to work under a man, but he thinks that she will agree to work with Pei, because he's nothing like her past employers, and he immediately decides to hire her. As they're about to leave the building, they see Lin watching news about the Phantom General, but Pei tells her that the game is trash. So she becomes upset, saying it wasn't created for profit, as she mentions that it's a good game. He explains that the design is terrible, but she tells him that he knows nothing. Pei leaves the building, and Lawrence asks Lin if she's looking for a job, so she tells him that she wants to work for the company that created the Phantom General. He tells her that Pei is the owner of the company, so she immediately runs after him, but she isn't able to catch up to him, and she realizes she just missed her chance to land her dream job. We see Pei waiting in a cafe, and Lulu approaches him for her interview, so he tells her to take a seat. She reveals that Lawrence already told her about his company, saying she's impressed that he was able to achieve something as a startup, thinking he's a capable young man. She thinks she's the best candidate for the job, and she starts bragging about her skill set, asking him if he has any questions. But he realizes that he's supposed to be the one giving the interview, because she's going to be working for him. So he explains that he's satisfied with her qualifications, telling her that she should only give him advice when he asks for her help. She accepts his terms, saying she can start working immediately, but he tells her that he doesn't have an office yet, which surprises her. So they visit a tower, where they are shown around, and told that they can rent it out. Pei asks Lulu if it's the most expensive office building in the city, and she confirms this, so he tells the man that he wants to rent the entire floor, and the agent is excited about this, calling him a generous person. Lulu reveals that the area is about 3,000 square meters, and the price for renting it is 360,000 yuan per month. but the man explains that he can have it for a cheaper price if he rents the entire floor, saying he won't find a better deal in the city. But he thinks it's too cheap, and the agent is surprised. But Pei tells him that life isn't easy, so he shouldn't lower his price to satisfy his customers. We learn that Pei is thinking about the Phantom General because it's still selling like hotcakes, so he wants to get rid of as much of his profits. The man is overjoyed to hear this, and Pei tells him to draft the contract as he thinks about how much he has spent for the first month, thinking his move is brilliant. Moments later, Lulu tells Pei that the rental procedure has been completed, so they need to purchase the office supplies. She shows him the list of items they need to buy, but he tells her that they need to promote a good working environment for the team, saying the items are too cheap. She asks him about their budget, so he tells her that he's willing to spend 2 million yuan, but Richie warns him that he's going against the rules, so he lowers it to 800,000 instead. Lulu thinks it's more than enough, and he tells her to buy the best office supplies she can find, saying they need to give their employees the best experience possible. But she asks him about his office, so he tells her to spare no cost, and she decides to rent a unit for him, giving him the keycard to access it. He realizes that this is a great idea, because he won't be able to return to his dorm if he works overtime, and Richie thinks this is reasonable, so he starts relaxing in his unit. Lulu shows him the recruitment policy, but he thinks it's too strict, telling her to change it, because he wants to attract the most useless employees in the world. But she warns him that they could end up hiring people who can't make games, and he realizes that his plan is flawed, because he'll be going against the rules if the employees can't produce a game, so he tells her that he's going to hire the game developers himself. But she advises him to change the way he looks, and he asks her if he can file a claim for his clothes, so she explains that he can, saying a proper suit is necessary for business meetings. So he decides to buy the most expensive suits he can find, and he realizes that he's doing great, thinking he's going to lose all of his money at this rate. He decides to hire another person without talent, and he thinks about hiring the laziest person in his school. He goes to a computer shop, where we see a boy named Bao, who is a gaming addict, and we learn that he was expelled from his school because of his poor academic performance. Pei thinks it's reasonable to recruit a veteran gamer, so he approaches Bao, saying he wants to hire him as a game designer, and Bao looks at him, thinking he's a scammer, so Bao tells him to go away. But he gives Bao money, saying he can have it as a salary advance, and this makes him interested. Pei tells him that they have excellent computers in the company, saying he can play there during his free time. But Bao reveals that he doesn't know how to develop games, so Pei explains that he has faith in Bao's gaming experience, asking him if he wants to develop the greatest game in the world. Bao accepts his offer, so he tells Bao to report in 2 days, and he becomes overjoyed, because he always wanted to be a game developer. The next day, Pei meets a man named Huang, who is practicing for the interview, so Pei approaches him, asking him if he's going to apply for the company. Pei pretends that he's also an applicant, asking Huang why he's late for the interview, so he reveals that he's currently employed, and he thought about applying during his lunch break because he isn't happy with his job. The elevator opens, and he meets his superior named Lu, who thinks he isn't going to make it because Pei's company has strict requirements. He enters the elevator with Pei, and they start talking about Lu, so Bao reveals that he's the lead game designer, thinking his background is impressive, so Bao thinks he isn't going to get the job. But as they reach the office, the employees greet Pei, causing Bao to become surprised, and he starts interviewing Bao, revealing that he's the CEO of the company. He tells Bao that he's the person they're looking for, asking him about his expected salary, so he explains that he isn't getting paid much, saying 2,000 yuan per month should be enough. But Pei reminds him that the cost of living is expensive, explaining that 2,000 yuan isn't enough to cover his expenses. So Pei offers to pay him double that amount, and he's overjoyed to hear this, saying he will sacrifice everything for the company. Later that day, Lulu approaches him, telling him that a girl wants to see him, and we see that it's Len, as she asks him if his goal is to make money. But he denies this, so she thinks he's perfect, thinking he's doing this for passion, and he asks Lulu about her, so she reveals that she was a terrible employee at her last company, but this makes him decide to hire her. Back in the dorm, Pei's roommates wonder where he is, because they haven't seen him for days. They ask Yang if he's going to return, and Yang tells them he's working, so he must have rented a place outside. We see Huang working in Pei's company, but he wonders why they aren't doing anything productive because they're getting paid to play video games. Everyone starts questioning Pei's goals, so Lin explains that he wants them to keep playing so that they can identify the problems in video games. Huang realizes that Bao has reached the max level in the games they're playing, and he thinks this is what Pei wants them to do. But Lin thinks he wants them to feel guilty so that they will work harder when the next task arrives. Everyone wonders where Pei is because he never shows up in the office, and we see him sitting on his couch, realizing that it will be difficult to control his employees. He's worried that his next game isn't going to flop, but he sees an action movie, and he comes up with an idea. The bell rings, and everyone's ordered to go home, but they wonder why they aren't doing anything for the company. At that moment, Pei appears, saying he's been absent because he's been thinking about the company's future. He informs everyone that they're going to be working on a first-person shooter, saying their goal is to become a leader in the gaming industry. Everyone starts doubting themselves, but he explains that he rejected the experts and picked them as the members in his team because he believes in their creativity. He tells them that they're the future of the gaming industry, saying Huang is a hidden gem because he performs his work diligently, and Bao is the master of games because his gaming skills are unrivaled. Pei thinks their team is invincible, saying they're going to make a great game, and he explains that he's going to give general directions in the early stages, saying he will leave everything to Bao and Huang. They head to the meeting room, where Pei gives Bao and Huang instructions, saying the game needs to have beginner-friendly controls, and the story needs to be incredibly long. He adds that the weapons must look cool, so that the players will want to buy them, and he ends the meeting, thinking his demands are going to ruin the game. But Huang thinks the players will complain if the controls are too simple, and the story won't be interesting if they don't keep it short. He adds that their company's reputation will be affected because they started a trend of zero in-game purchases, but they're going against it by listing guns for sale. Pei knows he has a point, but he tells Huang to believe in himself, saying he can overcome the problems. Pei appoints Huang as the lead designer and Bao as the game moderator, saying they need to come up with a draft in 1 week. After the meeting, Pei celebrates, thinking his game is going to fail, and he realizes that it's time to go home. So he leaves the office, and he sees Bao playing a game, bidding him farewell. We learn that he's the only employee allowed to work overtime, but Huang thanks Bao for helping him hide, saying he wants to do his best for the company, so he decides to work overtime. They discuss the project, as Bao mentions that Pei was able to achieve the best results with minimum resources, thinking they should follow his example. Bao thinks about spending money only on the important features of the game, and they enter Bao's imagination as he explains that he wants the game to start on the ocean, where the players are going to find an abandoned oil platform. Huang asks him about the enemies, and at that moment, a mummy suddenly attacks them, so Bao saves him, and the mummy falls off the platform. Countless mummies appear, as Bao explains that their model design is simple because they're wrapped in bandages. Bao shoots one of them, causing it to burn away, but they realize that they're about to get surrounded, so they start running away, as Bao explains that they don't need to simplify the controls, because they can just make the mummies easier to destroy. But he runs out of bullets, so they decide to retreat, climbing up a ladder, and they reach a safe spot, where they discuss the story mode. Bao thinks they need to add an important side character, and a girl appears, so Huang tries talking to her, but Bao reveals that she can't speak, because creating a speaking character is expensive. He explains that she'll be giving quests through her movements, and she leads Huang to a corner, where he encounters a mummy, so he runs away, and Bao knocks it down. But mummies swarm the area, so the girl gives Huang a rifle, and he uses it to defend himself. Bao arrives in a helicopter, and he helps them escape, saying the players will be invested in the story if they establish a bond with the characters. They return to reality, as Huang mentions that Bao is a genius, but he thinks Pei is smarter than him, thinking he didn't say anything about the game, because he wanted them to have fun creating it. Huang shares Bao's opinion, and they think he's an amazing person, calling him a visionary. They wonder what he meant by cool weapons, and they think he wants them to add a legendary weapon into the game. They continue working all night, and the next day, Huang tells Bao that their game is going to be amazing, saying he will do his best to make it perfect. But at that moment, Yang arrives, greeting Bao, but he's surprised to see Huang, realizing that he broke the rules. But that's